Here is a silence between the stars that most species never truly understand. It is not merely the absence of sound, for sound cannot travel through the vacuum anyway, but something deeper, something older. It is the silence of distances so vast that light itself grows weary crossing them. It is the silence of time, measured not in years or centuries, but in the slow death of suns and the patient drift of galaxies.
It is the silence that swallows empires whole and forgets their names before their ashes have cooled.
I have spent 400 years listening to that silence, and I had believed I understood it. I was wrong. My name is Commodore Vethril Saren of the Dominion Fleet, and I am recording this testimony because someone must. Because what happened in the Kelith corridor cannot be allowed to fade into rumor and speculation. Because the Dominion, what remains of it, needs to understand what we encountered out there in the dark between stars, what we surrounded, what we boarded, what we found inside.
The humans have a saying, "Curiosity killed the cat." I did not understand it when I first heard it. Now I understand it too well. Now I carry it in my chest like a shard of ice that will never melt.
We should not have looked inside. Gods forgive us. We should never have looked inside. The war had been going badly for 3 decades. That is a clinical way of saying it, the kind of sanitized language fleet commanders use in official reports while billions die screaming in the dark. The truth was uglier. The truth was that the Vreth Combine had been systematically dismantling everything the Dominion had built across 8,000 years of galactic expansion, and we had been powerless to stop them. They came from the galactic core, a species evolved in the crushing gravity and radiation storms of that dense stellar nursery, shaped by conditions that would have killed any other known life form. They were patient, they were methodical, and they were utterly, completely merciless in a way that made our own martial traditions seem like children's games. I had watched the fall of Throne Station, our oldest and greatest orbital fortress, its shields crumbling under weapons that seemed to ignore the fundamental laws of physics we had relied upon for millennia. I had received the final transmission from Admiral Kreth as his flagship came apart around him, his voice steady, even as fire consumed the bridge. I had counted the refugee ships that made it through the Combine blockades. So few, so terribly few, and tried not to think about the ones that hadn't. 17 core systems lost, 400 billion dead, and the Combine fleet, inexorable as entropy itself, pushing ever closer to our home world. We were desperate. We had been desperate for years, and desperate species do desperate things. That is how I found myself leading a patrol squadron through the Kelith corridor, a region of space so far from our core territories that we had never bothered to properly chart it. We were not there to fight. We were there to scavenge, to search the dead systems and abandoned stations for anything that might give us an edge, technology, weapons, resources, hope. Instead, we found the human ship. It drifted in the shadow of a gas giant, its running lights dim, its engines cold. At first, my sensor officer believed it was a derelict, just another piece of space debris left behind by some forgotten civilization. The Kelith corridor was full of such ghosts, remnants of species that had risen and fallen while the Dominion was still learning to harness fire. But then we got closer, and I saw it clearly for the first time. The ship was enormous. Not elegant,
not graceful. Where Dominion vessels curved and flowed like living things, this craft was brutalist, all hard angles and thick armor plating, studded with weapon mounts and sensor arrays in a configuration I didn't recognize. It looked less like a ship and more like a fortress that had somehow learned to fly, a slab of metal and will hurled into the cosmos by a species that clearly did not believe in aesthetic refinement.
"What is that?" my executive officer, Terath, asked. Her voice carried the same confusion I felt. "It doesn't match any known design pattern."
I studied the sensor readings scrolling across my tactical display. The ship's dimensions were staggering, nearly twice the length of our largest dreadnoughts, with a mass that suggested armor thickness measured in meters rather than centimeters. Its power signature was faint but present, suggesting the engines were on standby rather than dead. "Unknown origin," I said slowly. "But that armor configuration, that's designed for sustained combat, heavy combat. Whatever species built this expected to take punishment. Should we hail them?"
I considered it. We were deep in uncharted space, our supplies running low, our squadron battered from a skirmish with Combine raiders 3 cycles ago. The smart move would be to retreat, report our findings, and let someone else investigate. But we were desperate, and that ship, for all its crude ugliness, represented something we hadn't seen in years. Unknown technology, potential, possibility.
No, I decided. Not yet. Deploy the squadron. Standard encirclement pattern. Let's see what we're dealing with before we announce ourselves. It was, I would later realize, the first of many mistakes. We surrounded the Dreadnought with 12 warships, cruisers and destroyers mostly, the battered remnants of a patrol group that had once numbered 30. We positioned ourselves at optimal firing angles, our weapons charged and ready, our shields operating at maximum capacity. The Dreadnought did not react. It simply hung there in the darkness, silent and still, like a sleeping predator that had not yet noticed the scavengers circling its den. I watched it through the observation port of my bridge, trying to read some intention in those dark hull plates, some hint of what lay within. Nothing. Just silence and the eternal cold of space. "Commodore," my communications officer reported, "we're detecting faint internal activity. Life signs, possibly. The hull is too thick for precise readings. How many? Unknown. The shielding on that thing is remarkable. Our sensors can barely penetrate the outer layers." I made my second mistake then. Prepare a boarding party. I want to know what's inside that ship. Terath looked at me sharply. "Commodore, shouldn't we at least attempt contact first, if there are survivors?" "If there are survivors, they've seen us by now. They know we're here." I gestured at the Dreadnought's dark form. "They've had every opportunity to respond. Their silence is answer enough. Either they're dead, they're hostile, or they're waiting to see what we do. In any case, I intend to find out." I told myself it was tactical pragmatism. I told myself we couldn't afford to show weakness, couldn't afford to announce ourselves and give potential enemies time to prepare. I told myself many things. The truth was simpler and uglier. I was curious. After 400 years of war and death and slow defeat, here was something new, something unknown, and I wanted to understand it. Curiosity killed the cat, the humans say. I was about to learn what that meant. The boarding party consisted of 40 of my best soldiers, led by Lieutenant Commander Kreth'ax, a veteran of 18 major engagements, and one of the few officers I trusted absolutely. I watched their shuttle detach from our cruiser and arc toward the Dreadnought,
a small spark of life against that massive dark hull.
Approaching target vessel, Kreth'ax reported, his voice crackling slightly over the communication link. No defensive response. Proceeding to primary airlock. I leaned forward in my command chair, watching the shuttle's approach through our tactical display. The Dreadnought remained dark and still, offering no resistance, no acknowledgement of our presence. Airlock located. Commencing breach. I heard the muffled sounds of cutting tools through the audio feed, then a hiss of equalizing pressure, then silence. Kreth'ax, report. More silence. Then, Commodore, you need to see this. His voice had changed. Kreth'ax was a soldier who had held the line at Throne Station, who had watched his entire company die around him and still managed to evacuate the civilian transports. He had never, in all the years I had known him, sounded uncertain. He sounded uncertain now.
What is it? What have you found?
I don't. Commodore, I'm patching my visual feed to your display. You need to see this for yourself. The tactical display flickered, then resolved into an image from Kreth'ax's helmet camera. I saw the interior of the Dreadnought for the first time, and I felt something cold settle into my chest. The corridor was vast, easily large enough for a ground vehicle to drive through. The walls were lined with conduits and access panels, all functional, all utilitarian, all completely devoid of decoration or ornamentation. But that wasn't what had shaken Kreth'ax. It was the writing. Covering every available surface, written in a script I didn't recognize but which my translation systems were already struggling to parse, were words. Thousands of them. Millions, perhaps. Names, I realized slowly. They were names, and dates, and brief phrases that my systems finally managed to translate. Remember the fallen. Kenji Yamamoto, Earth, 2089-2143. Died defending Mars Colony 7. The 401st Infantry Division. Ganymede Station. None survived. All remembered. On and on, covering the walls, the ceiling, every surface that could hold text. A memorial. The entire ship was a memorial. Commodore, Kreth'ax whispered, this vessel has been inscribed with names. Millions of names. Every corridor, every chamber. I've never seen anything like it.
What species? I demanded. Who built this ship?
I think I found a designation, sir. The characters are unusual, but our systems have a partial match in the old archives. He paused, and I heard him swallow. They called themselves humans. Humans. I knew that name. Everyone in the Dominion knew it, though we rarely spoke of it. A primitive species from an unremarkable system in the outer spiral arm. We had observed them briefly, perhaps 3 centuries ago, and classified them as irrelevant, too young, too violent, too likely to destroy themselves before achieving anything of significance. We had stopped watching them. We had forgotten them. And in that forgetting, something had clearly changed. Continue your sweep, I ordered. Find out who's aboard, and Kreth'ax, be careful. Understood, Commodore. But I could tell from his voice that caution was no longer his primary concern. Like me, like all of us, he had been infected by curiosity. He wanted to know what else was hidden in that vast, dark ship. We were about to find out. The boarding party moved deeper into the Dreadnought, and with each chamber they entered, my unease grew. The memorial inscriptions were only the beginning.
Beyond them, the ship revealed itself in layers, each more disturbing than the last.
There was the armory, filled with weapons that my analysis systems could barely comprehend. Kinetic accelerators that fired projectiles at a significant fraction of light speed. Plasma containment systems more stable than anything we had developed, and something my officers tentatively identified as directed antimatter weaponry that should not have been possible outside theoretical models. There were the crew quarters, Spartan and functional, each one containing personal effects that Kreth'ax's team cataloged with growing amazement. Photographs of families, handwritten letters, small tokens and mementos that suggested not just soldiers, but people, individuals with histories and loves and dreams. And there were the training halls, vast chambers filled with combat simulation equipment, physical conditioning apparatus, and tactical displays showing battles that my systems could not identify. Whoever these humans were, they had clearly spent considerable time preparing for war. "Commodore," Kreth'ax reported, his voice now openly awed, "we've found what appears to be the ship's historical archive. I'm transmitting the data now."
The information flooded my display, and I began to read.
Humanity's story unfolded before me in fragments and images. I saw their homeworld, a small blue planet orbiting an unremarkable yellow star. I saw their early history, bloody and chaotic, filled with warfare and suffering, and the kind of self-destructive violence that we had expected to consume them. But they had not been consumed.
Again and again, they had pulled themselves back from the brink. They had fought world wars and survived. They had faced nuclear annihilation and stepped away. They had confronted environmental collapse, resource depletion, pandemic, and existential crisis after existential crisis, and they had endured.
More than endured, they had grown stronger.
I saw the expansion of their civilization into their solar system. Tentative at first, then increasingly confident. I saw them establish colonies on worlds that should have been uninhabitable, terraforming hostile environments through sheer stubborn refusal to accept that something could not be done. I saw them encounter the challenges of interstellar travel and solve them not through theoretical elegance, but through brute force engineering and willingness to sacrifice.
And I saw the wars.
Humanity had fought. Gods above and below, how they had fought. Against each other, at first, colonial rebellions and territorial disputes, and all the familiar patterns of a young species learning to manage its own expansion, but also against others, against threats that came from the dark between stars, against species that saw humanity as prey.
None of those species existed anymore. The archive made that very clear. The Kethri Imperium, First Contact War, 2203-2211. Estimated Kethri population at war's start, 47 billion. Estimated Kethri population at war's end, 0. Humanity remembers.
The Vorathi Collective. Border conflicts, 2234-2241. Vorathi refused peaceful resolution. Vorathi no longer exist. Humanity remembers.
The Machine Intelligence of Proxima. Attempted Genocide of Human Colony, 2267. Machine Intelligence decommissioned. Humanity remembers. Entry after entry, species after species, all destroyed, all remembered in those terrible 2 words that repeated like a dirge throughout the archive.
Humanity remembers.
"Commodore," Tereth said softly,
her voice breaking through my growing horror. "What have we found?"
I couldn't answer. My eyes were fixed on the final entries in the archive, the most recent ones, entries that described something familiar. The Vreth Combine, galactic core species, currently engaged in aggressive expansion. Observed extinction-level attacks on multiple civilizations. Analysis indicates existential threat to galactic stability. Humanity is watching. Humanity is waiting. Humanity remembers. They knew about the Combine. They had been watching, and they had been waiting. For what? You have been losing for 30 years. At current trajectories, your civilization will be extinct within another 20. I felt my crew stiffen around me. Such blunt assessments were not spoken aloud, no matter how true everyone knew them to be.
"You know much about our situation," I said carefully.
We know everything about your situation. We've been watching, learning, preparing. She paused. That is what we do, Commodore. It is what we have always done. We watch, we wait, we remember. And when the moment is right, we act.
And what moment is that?
Captain Torres was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, tinged with something that might have been compassion. You came here looking for hope, didn't you? Your supplies are low, your ships are damaged. You've been scavenging the dead systems, searching for anything that might give your people a chance. She shook her head slowly. I've read your history, Commodore. The Dominion was old when my species was still learning to make fire. You've built something remarkable, beautiful, a civilization of art and philosophy and achievement spanning 8,000 years. And now it's dying. Yes, it's dying because you forgot something, something my people never had the luxury of forgetting. She stood, and despite her small stature, she seemed suddenly larger, more imposing. Do you know what that is? I did not answer. I could not. You forgot what it means to truly fight, she said. Not for territory, not for resources, not for pride or glory or expansion. You forgot what it means to fight for survival, to fight with everything you have, holding nothing back, because the alternative is not defeat, but annihilation. And you haven't forgotten? We never knew anything else. She gestured, and the display behind her activated, showing images I did not immediately understand. Humanity has been fighting for survival since before we had words, against nature, against each other, against everything the universe could throw at us. We've been hammered and broken and nearly destroyed more times than I can count. And every time we got back up, every time we found a way. The images resolved into something I recognized. Battle footage. Human ships engaging vessels that looked disturbingly similar to Combine designs. We've fought the Combine before, Captain Torres said quietly. 14 years ago, a Combine raiding fleet strayed into human-monitored space. They destroyed a mining station on the edge of our territory. 342 people, miners, families, children. Her voice hardened. We tracked that fleet for 6 months. We found it, and we made an example of it. An example? We don't leave threats alive, Commodore. We can't afford to. Every species that has ever attacked humanity has learned that lesson. Usually the hard way. Usually too late. She turned back to face me directly. The Combine learned it too. They've avoided our space ever since. They fear us. I stared at her, this small, calm human with her quiet voice and her ancient eyes, and I began to understand what I was looking at. Not a primitive, not a child species stumbling through the cosmos. A survivor, a predator, something that had been shaped by suffering into an instrument of terrible, patient vengeance.
"What do you want?" I asked. "I told you, to deliver a warning and an offer." She folded her hands behind her back. "The warning is this: the Combine is coming for you. Their main fleet is 6 months out from your homeworld. They intend to end your species completely, as they've ended so many others. You cannot stop them, not alone."
"And the offer? Let us help you."
I transferred to the remembrance the next cycle. I had to see it for myself. I had to understand. Captain Torres met me at the airlock, alone and unarmed. She was even smaller in person than she had seemed on the display, barely reaching my chest, her frame slight, her movements economical and unhurried. Nothing about her physical presence was impressive.
But her eyes, those eyes held galaxies of grief and rage and determination. They were the eyes of someone who had seen everything and refused to look away.
"Welcome aboard the Remembrance," she said. "I imagine you have questions."
"Many." "Ask them." She began walking, and I fell into step beside her. "We have time. Not much, but enough." I looked around at the corridor walls, at the endless names inscribed there. This ship, it's a memorial? Every human warship is a memorial. We carry our dead with us, Commodore. Every soldier who has ever fallen in service of humanity, their name is inscribed somewhere in our fleet. This ship alone carries 4 million names. Our largest vessels carry tens of millions. She stopped walking and turned to face me. Because we remember. Because forgetting them would mean their sacrifices were meaningless. Because carrying their names gives us strength, reminds us what we're fighting for and what has already been paid. Doesn't it weigh on you? All these dead? Every moment of every day. Her voice was matter-of-fact, without self-pity. That's the point. That weight is what keeps us grounded. It's what reminds us that war is not a game, not a policy tool, not a means of expansion. War is horror, and we carry that horror with us so we never forget it. I thought of the Dominion's approach to warfare, the careful calculations, the strategic objectives, the acceptable casualty thresholds. We had made it abstract, clinical. We had forgotten that each number represented a life, a family, a future that would never be. Perhaps that was why we were losing. "Show me," I said. "Show me what humanity has become." Captain Torres nodded. "This way." She took me to the heart of the ship, a vast command center that hummed with quiet power. Dozens of human crew members sat at their stations, monitoring systems and displays that I didn't fully understand. They glanced at me with curiosity, but not fear, nodding politely before returning to their work. "This is the nerve center of the Remembrance," Torres explained. "From here, we can coordinate operations across the entire sector." "One ship coordinate an entire sector?" "The Remembrance isn't just one ship, Commodore." She gestured, and the central display activated, showing a tactical map of the surrounding region. "It's a nexus, a command node, part of a network that extends across human space." The map expanded, and I felt my breath catch. Ships, hundreds of them, thousands. They appeared as points of light scattered throughout the region, each one connected to the others by lines of communication and coordination. And they were everywhere, hidden in nebulae, drifting in the shadows of gas giants, waiting in the dark spaces between stars.
"We've been positioning for years," Torres said quietly, "watching the Combine advance, studying their tactics, preparing for the moment when intervention became necessary."
You knew this was coming? The Combine's war against the Dominion?
We knew something was coming. The Combine's pattern is predictable. Expansion, consumption, extinction of competing species. They would have come for us eventually. We simply chose to meet them on ground of our choosing.
And you chose to use us as that ground.
She met my accusation without flinching. Yes, the Dominion is fighting the war we would have had to fight anyway. Every Combine ship destroyed, every resource they expend, it weakens them for the confrontation we've been preparing for. We are not a charitable species, Commodore. We help ourselves by helping you.
I should have been angry. A younger version of me would have been furious at the manipulation, the cold calculation. But I was too old for such luxury now. I had spent 400 years fighting a losing war. I understood pragmatism.
What exactly are you offering? I asked.
Torres walked to the central display and began manipulating controls. The tactical map shifted, showing the projected advance of the Combine fleet toward the Dominion homeworld.
The Combine doesn't know we're here. They believe their only opposition is your battered fleet. They expect to sweep through your remaining defenses and finish what they started. She highlighted several points on the map. They will be surprised.
You intend to ambush them?
We intend to annihilate them. Her voice was flat, utterly without emotion. Not defeat, not pushback. Annihilate. The Combine represents an existential threat to every species in this galaxy. We do not leave existential threats alive. I studied the tactical display, my military mind automatically analyzing the positions and projections. How many ships do you actually have?
In this sector, 12,000 combat-capable vessels, another 30,000 in reserve positions throughout human space.
I stared at her. That's impossible. A fleet that size would have been detected. The energy signatures alone.
Our ships run cold when needed. Minimal emissions, distributed power systems, stealth configurations developed over centuries of warfare. She shrugged slightly. We've been hiding since before your Dominion achieved faster-than-light travel. We've gotten quite good at it.
Why? Why hide? With power like this, you could have...
Could have what? Conquered? Dominated? She shook her head. We've seen what that leads to. We've done it ourselves in our darker moments. Empire is a trap. It makes you complacent. It makes you forget what matters. Better to wait, to watch, to prepare for the threats that truly matter.
And the Combine truly matters?
The Combine is a species that exists only to consume. They have no art, no culture, no purpose beyond expansion and destruction. They're a cancer in the galaxy, and they need to be cut out. Her eyes met mine, and I saw something terrible in their depths. We've been waiting for this moment for a long time, Commodore. Training for it, building for it, and now, finally, we're going to end it.
I should have felt hope. After 30 years of defeat, here was an ally with the power to change everything. But looking into those calm, patient eyes, I felt something else entirely.
Fear.
Not of the Combine, of her, of what humanity had become while we weren't watching.
The weeks that followed were a blur of preparation and revelation. I sent word back to the Dominion High Command, warning them of what was coming and what I had found. The response was predictably skeptical. How could a species we had dismissed as primitives have developed such power? How could we trust beings we knew nothing about?
But they were desperate enough to listen, and when the human ships began arriving at our staging points, emerging from hiding places throughout the sector, their forms dark and ominous against the stars, skepticism turned to something else. The human vessels were nothing like ours. Where Dominion ships were elegant, the human craft were brutal, functional. Every line, every surface, every component was designed for one purpose: war. They bristled with weapons. Their armor could withstand impacts that would shatter our heaviest battleships. And they moved with a coordination that spoke of centuries of practice and refinement. I watched them gather from the observation deck of the Remembrance, and I tried to count them. I gave up after the first 1,000.
Impressive, isn't it? Captain Torres joined me at the viewport, her reflection ghostly against the backdrop of assembling warships, the combined might of humanity, preparing for battle.
It's terrifying, I admitted. How did you build all this? How did you hide it? With great effort and greater sacrifice. She was silent for a moment, watching the ships move into formation. Every vessel out there represents resources that could have gone to comfort, to expansion, to the improvement of civilian life. Instead, they went to this, to the certainty that someday, somehow, we would face a threat that required everything we had. Your people accepted this?
Our people demanded it. Humanity has never truly known peace, Commodore. We've known pauses, interludes, moments of calm between storms, but we've always known in our bones that the next storm was coming, that eternal vigilance was the price of survival. She turned to face me. Your Dominion forgot that. You had peace for so long that you forgot how to fight, how to sacrifice, how to prepare for the worst.
And now we pay the price. Yes, but you don't have to pay it alone. She gestured at the assembling fleet. This is our offer, Commodore, our alliance. We will fight beside you, bleed beside you, die beside you if necessary. In exchange, we ask only one thing.
Remember, when this is over, when the Combine is destroyed and the galaxy is safe again, remember what happened here. Remember that it wasn't your power alone that saved your people. Remember that cooperation and humility and the willingness to accept help, these are not weaknesses, they're strengths.
I considered her words, and I found I had no argument against them. We had been proud. We had been certain of our superiority, and it had nearly cost us everything.
I will remember. I promised. My people will remember.
Captain Torres nodded. Then we have an accord. She turned back to the viewport, where the human fleet continued to grow. The Combine arrives in 3 weeks. By then, we'll be ready. And then... She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Then there would be a reckoning. The Combine fleet emerged from hyperspace like a swarm of predatory insects, blotting out the stars with their numbers. Their lead vessels were massive, city-sized constructs bristling with weapons that had shattered every defense the Dominion had ever fielded. Behind them came wave after wave of smaller craft, support vessels, troop transports, the full, terrible weight of a species designed for conquest. From the bridge of my cruiser, positioned at the heart of the human formation, I watched them come. And despite everything I had seen, despite the army gathered around me, I felt the old fear rising in my chest. There were so many of them.
Combined fleet is in sensor range, my tactical officer reported. They're detecting our positions. Their formation is shifting. On the tactical display, I could see the Combine vessels adjusting their approach. They had expected to find the battered remnants of the Dominion fleet. Instead, they had found something else entirely.
12,000 human warships, arranged in overlapping fields of fire. Behind them, the Dominion survivors, 200 vessels, all that remained of our once mighty armada. And behind us, the homeworld we had sworn to protect.
They're hesitating. Captain Torres's voice came over the fleet-wide channel. They see us. They're trying to figure out who we are.
Will they attack? I asked.
They have to. They've committed too many resources, come too far. Retreat would be an admission of failure, and the Combine doesn't tolerate failure. Besides, they're curious, just like you were. They want to know what's inside these strange ships.
And they shouldn't have looked. The realization hit me with sudden clarity. This was what she had planned all along. Not just a battle, but a demonstration. The Combine would attack because that was their nature. They could not do otherwise. They would throw themselves against the human fleet, curious and confident and utterly unprepared for what awaited them. And in doing so, they would learn what I had learned in the corridors of the Remembrance. They would learn what humanity truly was.
All vessels, this is Captain Torres. Hold positions. Let them come to us. Let them think we're the prey. Her voice was calm, almost casual, as if she were discussing routine maneuvers rather than the fate of multiple civilizations. And when they're committed, we show them who we really are. The Combine fleet accelerated, their weapons powered up, their shields activated, their predatory formation shifting into attack configuration. They came with the confidence of a species that had never known defeat, never faced an enemy that could truly threaten them. They flowed like water, like fire, like a living thing made of metal and fury. Vessels peeled away from the main formation to strike at Combine flanks, then merged back before counterattacks could land. Damaged ships withdrew smoothly, replaced by fresh vessels from the reserves. Every weapon, every movement, every decision was coordinated with a precision that spoke of centuries of practice and an almost telepathic understanding between crews. But the truly terrifying thing was the silence. There were no battle cries, no calls to glory, just calm, methodical destruction. The human channels carried nothing but tactical information, coordinates, damage reports, targeting solutions. They killed with the efficiency of surgeons, the patience of predators, the absolute certainty of beings who had done this before and would do it again.
Commodore, my tactical officer breathed, the Combine flagship is attempting to retreat. I looked at the display. The massive Combine command vessel, heart of the enemy fleet, was indeed trying to withdraw. Its engines flared as it turned, desperate to escape the killing field it had stumbled into.
It didn't make it.
A squadron of human vessels, smaller, faster, almost invisible against the chaos of battle, had been waiting. They emerged from the shadows of a debris cloud and struck the flagship with focused, devastating precision. Its shields collapsed, its engines died, and then, impossibly, human boarding craft began launching toward its hull. They're boarding it? I could not believe what I was seeing. In the middle of battle? The Combine command structure is centralized, Torres's voice came over the channel. Kill the flagship's command crew, and their fleet coordination collapses. We're not just defeating them, Commodore. We're dismembering them. I watched in horrified fascination as human soldiers breached the Combine flagship and began their work. The feeds from their helmet cameras appeared on our tactical displays. I don't know if this was intentional, a demonstration for our benefit, or simply a consequence of the open communication protocols. Either way, I could not look away. The humans fought through the corridors of the enemy ship with brutal efficiency. They moved in coordinated teams, covering each other, advancing relentlessly. The Combine warriors, terrifying creatures that had slaughtered Dominion soldiers by the millions, fell before them like grain before the harvest. And through it all, the humans were silent, focused, professional. They reached the command center in less than 30 minutes. I saw the Combine Admiral, a massive creature whose very presence had haunted my nightmares for 30 years, rise to face them. A single human soldier stepped forward. She was small, unremarkable, carrying a weapon that seemed almost crude compared to the Combine's elegant instruments of death. "This is for everyone you've killed," she said quietly. "Humanity remembers." Then she pulled the trigger. The flagship's communications systems broadcast the Admiral's death to the entire Combine fleet, and just like Torres had predicted, their coordination collapsed. What followed was not a battle, it was an extermination. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, not a single Combine vessel remained operational. Some had been destroyed outright, vaporized by human weapons, or torn apart by coordinated strikes. Others drifted dead in space, their crews eliminated by boarding parties. A few had attempted to surrender, the first time in recorded history that the Combine had offered capitulation. The humans did not accept. I understood why. I did not agree with it, but I understood. Captain Torres appeared on my display as the last enemy contacts winked out. Her face was calm, composed, showing no sign of the cataclysmic violence that had just occurred. She might have been discussing fleet maintenance rather than the annihilation of an ancient and powerful species. "It's done," she said simply. "The Combine's main fleet is destroyed. Their homeworld will receive word within the month. They will not threaten this region of space again." "You killed them all," I said. I could not keep the tremor from my voice. "Even the ones who surrendered?" "Yes. No apology, no justification, just acknowledgement. The Combine built their entire civilization on conquest and extinction. They could not be reformed, could not be contained, could not be trusted to honor any peace. Leaving them alive would have meant leaving a threat for future generations. We do not leave threats alive, Commodore." "Is that what we are to you? A potential threat?" She studied me through the display, and I saw something shift behind her eyes. Something almost human, almost warm. "The Dominion is not a threat. You're survivors, like us." She paused. "Your civilization made mistakes, grew complacent, forgot what it took to survive in a hostile universe. But you didn't give up. Even when everything was lost, even when the darkness was closing in, you kept fighting, kept searching for hope." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "That's why we helped you. That's why we'll continue to help you, because we recognize something of ourselves in your struggle." I looked out the viewport at the debris field that had once been the Combine fleet. Millions of dead, an entire species effectively ended in a single afternoon, and the humans had done it with the same calm efficiency they brought to everything else. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now you rebuild. We'll help where we can. Technology, resources, expertise. But the rebuilding has to be yours. You have to remember what you learned here, what it cost, why it happened." "And humanity?" "We'll continue watching, waiting, preparing." She shrugged. "It's what we do. Somewhere out there's another threat rising. There always is. And when it comes, we'll be ready." She turned to go, then paused. "You asked me once why we carry the names of our dead, why we inscribe them on our ships and carry them with us into battle." "I remember." "The answer is simpler than you might think."
She turned back to face me. We carry them because they carried us. Every human who ever lived, who ever fought, who ever died so that others might survive, they're part of who we are. Their strength is our strength. Their sacrifices built the foundation we stand on. Her eyes grew distant. When we go into battle, we're never alone. We carry the weight of every generation that came before us, and that weight, it makes us unstoppable.
She nodded once, a gesture of farewell, and the display went dark.
I stood there for a long time, looking out at the stars and the debris and the quiet aftermath of the day's horror. I thought about everything I had seen, everything I had learned.
Humanity had hidden in the shadows for centuries, waiting and watching and preparing. They had built a military machine of terrifying power and kept it secret from a galaxy that had dismissed them as primitives. They had struck without warning, without mercy, without the slightest hesitation.
And they had done it not for conquest or glory, but for survival, for the simple, terrible necessity of removing threats before those threats could destroy them.
We had surrounded a human dreadnought with our warships. We had boarded it. We had looked inside.
And we had found something that would haunt me for the rest of my long, long life.
Not monsters, not gods, just beings shaped by endless struggle into something harder than steel and colder than the void itself. Beings who carried the weight of their entire history on their shoulders and refused to let it break them. Beings who had learned, through millennia of suffering and loss, that the only true weakness was the failure to prepare for the worst.
We shouldn't have looked inside.
Not because of what we found, but because of what it taught us about ourselves. The Dominion had been old when humanity was young. We had built wonders that spanned galaxies. We had believed ourselves the masters of creation, the inheritors of eternity.
And we had nearly died because we forgot what it meant to struggle.
Humanity never forgot. Humanity never stopped struggling. And in the end, that simple, terrible truth had made all the difference.
Years have passed since the battle of the homeworld. The Dominion has begun to rebuild, slowly and painfully, guided by the lessons we learned in blood and fire. We are not what we were. We will never be what we were again.
Perhaps that is for the best. Humanity remains in the shadows, watching as always. They keep their distance, respecting our independence, while quietly ensuring no new threats rise to challenge us. We see their ships sometimes, ghosting through the void on missions we can only guess at. We see the names inscribed on their hulls, the endless memorial to sacrifices we can barely comprehend.
And we remember.
I am old now, even by Dominion standards. I have seen more than any being should have to see. I have learned truths that have broken my certainty and rebuilt it into something stronger, something humbler. But there is one truth above all others that I carry with me, that I pass on to every young officer who serves under my command. Never underestimate humanity. Never mistake their silence for weakness, their patience for passivity, their kindness for vulnerability. They are the most dangerous species in the galaxy, not because of their weapons or their ships, but because of what they carry inside them. The weight of their dead, the memory of their struggles, the absolute unyielding refusal to accept extinction. We surrounded a human dreadnought once. We looked inside. We found names,
Millions of names, billions of names, an endless testament to everyone who had ever died so that humanity might live.
We found weight, the weight of history, of sacrifice, of suffering transformed into strength.
We found the reason humanity survives when so many others fall.
And we found something else, something I did not understand at the time, but which has become clearer with each passing year.
Hope. Not the naive hope of the young who have not yet learned how cruel the universe can be, but the hard hope of survivors, the hope that knows the cost of everything and still chooses to keep fighting, the hope that has been tempered in fire and forged in darkness and emerged stronger than any weapon ever made.
That is what we found inside the human dreadnought. That is what we should never have looked at, because once seen, it cannot be forgotten.
And that is why, when the next darkness rises, when the next threat emerges from the void between stars, I will not despair, because humanity will be there, waiting, watching, carrying their dead on their shoulders and their hope in their hearts.
And they will remember.
They always remember.